All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the main part of the session. And Amy will be helping us, Amy Peterson, you can also see there. She will be happy to help with any technical issues, and she can also communicate with you through the QA or the chat. All right. Okay, so let's talk quickly about our session objectives today. So the first objective, we want to describe some strategies that you can leverage to support your self-directed learning. We're going to also show how Progress Center resources can be used to implement these approaches. And we're going to share some ways to incorporate some self-directed learning strategies into your own existing professional development strategies. So those are our goals for the session today. Okay, but first, I want to take a minute for you to stop and kind of think about your own experiences with self-directed learning. And by self-directed, it means that it isn't mandated to you from someone else. It's kind of something you seek out on your own to improve your practice or improve your knowledge or skills. So think about a time when you engaged in self-directed learning. What strategies did you use? And were these strategies helpful? Why or why not? So just think for a moment. You can post in the chat. Feel free to communicate there. But just think about it, a time when you sought out something that you wanted to learn and you developed a plan or whatever you did to learn that thing. So maybe you can tell us, was your plan successful? Not so successful, or you can think in general what helps you as an adult to learn new things. Ooh, I like having a deadline for unpleasant tasks. Yes. Finding some dedicated time for studying. Someone else says setting aside specific time, where or when, to focus on a task. Great. Yep, having a schedule. Oh, finding a buddy. So it seems like a lot of you are using some pretty good strategies already. Someone else to give some positive feedback and maybe a bit of motivation. All right, has anybody tried something that was not a helpful strategy? Sometimes I think it's good to share some examples and non-examples. So a good example of researching, gathering resources, outlining a plan, getting help from others. That's definitely a good example. Getting some reinforcement. Yeah, definitely waiting to the last minute is no good. Yes. So a good thing, giving a task and a time frame to finish, setting time for yourself, which we know is important, right? And can sometimes be hard to do. All right, so it sounds like you all have a lot of good strategies. In addition, you can keep posting strategies. Trying to learn from home is not productive. Oh, you have to leave your house to fully engage. Yes, there can be too many distractions definitely at home. So being aware of what environment supports your learning the best is a good thing. All right, so we're going to move on, but keep this in mind as we go through some of the tips we're going to talk about in this session and kind of look at them and how we can put those into practice. And we can maybe come back and share a little bit more at the end as well. Okay, so e-learning. So some of you, I'm wondering, and you can just post this in the chat too, it's not a formal question, but when you hear the word e-learning or online learning, some of you may get really excited about that. Some people have a definitely more negative connotation with that word. So, you know, a lot of times we think about these online courses or online modules that we're forced to take due to some compliance issue or something that's mandated by our place of work. And usually it's not a pleasant learning experience, right? So one of the things that can happen, it's a constant, yeah. So for better or for worse, since COVID, there's been an explosion in e-learning, right? So that's kind of one of the things that we're going to talk about today. For better or worse, e-learning seems like it's here. I personally think, yeah, some people don't like a lot of them, right? I think that's a common theme that you hear from people quite often, because maybe they lack interaction, right? It's hard to get engaged, right? So we're going to talk about how you can overcome these things, because I will say I am an instructional designer and I develop online learning, and I can tell you that there's some really good online learning. And there's also some not so good. And a lot of times the not so good seems to win out over the really good, right? But despite that, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to get yourself engaged, even if maybe a module doesn't have as much engagement or interaction as you'd like. How to be successful, no matter what the e-learning module is. So one of the most important things, something that I always think of, is that, a lot of times we turn into a zombie, right? So don't turn your brain off and become an e-learning zombie when you're faced with these online modules, because a lot of times, and I am, I do this myself when I see an online module that I have to take. And then I get really frustrated because it's interactive and I think, oh, wow, I wish I could just sit here and click through and get this thing over with, right? But we know that that's not the best way to learn anything, is to kind of turn your brain off and be a passive participant in any sort of learning event, right? So don't become a zombie with your e-learning, because you want to retain that information most of the time, especially if it's self-directed. So make sure you don't turn your brain off. So we're going to talk about some ways not to do that. So just a little quick sort of reminder, as adults, some things to kind of keep in mind. We're all very well aware of, teaching and learning, but sometimes it's good to have a reminder about adult learning principles. So, adults learn well if it's self-directed, right? If they choose and seek out the information on their own, there's some kind of motivational aspect of that. So self-directed learning is going to be more powerful for adults. Make sure that the learning is relevant. How is it connected to your, context? How is it connected to the work that you do, right? So seek out things that are relevant. As adults, that's what we need to do. Make sure that the learning that we're doing is practical, right? As adults, we're busy. We have a lot of other things that are competing for our time. So we want things to be practical. And we also want to build upon our existing knowledge and experiences, right? So all of these factors are things that go into making a successful learning experience for adults. Okay, so we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to be successful in these sort of self-directed learning opportunities. And we're going to do that by looking at some of the Progress Center resources. So just to let you know that the Progress Center is not just in terms of training. We have more than just the e-learning modules themselves. All of our courses consist of the self-paced modules, which is the online learning. But we also have a list of, we also have resource documents with lists of additional resources that you can seek out to expand your training or your learning. And we are in the process of developing note-taking guides. So we have note-taking guides developed for one of our course collections, and we're currently in the process of developing and finishing up note-taking guides for the other courses that we offer, or the other online modules that we offer. So we wanted to talk today about how you can use all of these resources together to make a more impactful learning experience for yourself. So let's just quickly take a look. You can see a screenshot here, but I wanted to just quickly show you what that looks like. So this is our learning management system. This is Moodle. And you can, if you want to take any of our online modules, it's free to enroll. You just need to sign up. Some of you may have already done that. But this is what it kind of looks like when you get into a course. So you can see that you have, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see that you have the self-paced module, which you'll click on to kind of go through the content. But then we also have our note-taking guide, which I'll show you in just a second. And then we have our list of resources. So let's take a look quickly at our resources. So in addition to the modules that we offer, don't forget about the resources. And we're going to talk about why in just a minute. but I wanted to show you the robust list of resources that we have for each of our modules, which can help you kind of put together a learning path. So some of you mentioned in the comments that putting together a plan, kind of plotting out the resources that you're going to use is what helps you be successful. And this resource guide can help you do that. So not only will you learn from the learning module, but you can continue your path based on what things you still want to learn more about. So it's self-directed. You can choose. You don't have to go to all the resources, or you can do them and come to them over time, which is also a strategy to help you retain that information a little bit more, is that, if you take the module, you take a little time, and then you come back to the resources to extend your learning, and you keep returning to these topics over time, can make for a more impactful learning experience. So here is an example of our resources. And here's an example of one of our new note-taking guides. So this is for the path to progress. So again, the note-taking guide is attached to the module, and it provides the learning outcomes. And you can see that the note-taking guide is really guiding you through the content of each module in a way that kind of helps you stay on track with the content. We do know that that some of our modules are packed with information, and that's for a reason, because we want you to be able to get the most, detailed and correct information from these modules, but it is a lot to process. So we think that these note-taking guides will help you to kind of take time to process, understand what you're reading a little bit or what you're seeing in the modules, and give you something to return to so that you can refresh your memory, you can extend your learning in different ways. So they're very open-ended, because as we know, when you write down things word for word or verbatim, that's not necessarily helping you process. So we've given you some open space here. So we've given you a guide to the content on the left, but then we've given you some space for notes, questions, anything that you might want to note down, are things that you want to seek out more information for. So it's up to you. You can really be the driver of what you use this note-taking guide for. In addition to the kind of outline to help guide you through the module, we also provide you with some summary questions to give you a moment to stop and consolidate your learning. Or it's something that you can do, down the road. So you can take the module, take the notes, come back to the note-taking guide at another time and answer these summary questions to, again, help you think about, what you've learned and try to, remember what you learned in the module and kind of come back and consolidate that learning. Yes, so one of the things too is that you can download this, you can handwrite. I know a lot of studies have shown that handwriting notes is more effective than typing notes, but for some reason, if you need to type your notes, you can certainly do that as well. There's different reasons why you might want to handwrite versus typing your notes, but that option is available for either way or for either modality. And then one last thing that we have for you in the note-taking guide, in addition to the summary questions, going to zoom down. Hopefully this doesn't give you a headache there. And we have some sample responses for the summary questions at the end of each note-taking guide, so that you can kind of compare your answers to the sample responses to kind of help give you a little bit of a self-assessment opportunity to see where your gaps in understanding might be. You can go back to the module and rewatch that session or that section where you seem to still be struggling. So you can definitely use it in a lot of different ways, and however helps you learn the best. So we're going to talk about some strategies, but we wanted to point out these features of the note-taking guide so you know what's available to you, and there's many different ways that you could use it. All right, so we're going to go back to our session. Okay, so now I wanted to talk about a few strategies, and I've already touched upon some of them, and you have as well in the comments that you posted in the chat. So I'm going to go through a series of 10 tips. I like to keep things at 10 or 7, right? Because I know that we can't process more than, 7 to 10 new pieces of information at a time. So I like to keep things at a nice round number of 10 tips that you can use to kind of get the most impact out of these online modules and this online self-directed learning. So the first tip that I have for you is to be a goal-setting grandmaster. And what that means is before you start any sort of learning journey, self-directed learning journey, Try to figure out what your objectives are. Now, we always provide learning objectives for you, right? And that's a guide for us to kind of let you know what to expect out of a module. But also, it's important to have your own goals and your own objectives for any learning experience, especially a self-directed learning experience. Only you know your own context and your own needs and your own gaps. So putting together your learning objectives can help you kind of think ahead of time what you're seeking from that learning experience. And then you can use those objectives to kind of view the content through that lens to help you kind of contextualize and see how the content aligns with your own personal and professional goals. Okay, and use those to develop a personalized learning plan. And I know somebody mentioned that in the comments, so put together your plan. Like I said, you've got the resources, you've got the modules, you've got your objectives that you've set out before you start the training. So kind of, put a schedule to yourself. Think about where you can go if it's hard for you to learn at home, if it's hard to do it in the morning. Personally, I like to take moments in the afternoon if I have time, if I'm, in a space where I need a break from the work that I'm doing, I might stop and do a little self-directed learning to kind of get me out of one thing that I'm doing, give me something else to focus my thoughts on, and then go back to some other work that I need to do. So that works for me, but it may not work for you. Some people like to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's definitely not me, but if you want to get up really early and carve out some space, that's great too. So a little note that we have related to the modules and the Progress Center resources. You can use the self-paced modules that we have, the note-taking guides, tip sheets, which we're going to preview. Some of you, hopefully all of you know about our tip sheets, but if you don't, we're going to take a look at some of those. And any of the resources, additional resources to kind of develop your plan. So you've got all of these great resources, plot out, a topic that you want to focus on, and add some variety, right? Because sometimes you can't do too many learning modules all at once because they're pretty intense. So do one learning module, maybe watch a webinar that's related, that's been linked on the resources, or go take a look at a tip sheet. So the more variety that you have and the more variation related to a particular topic, the better it's going to help you solidify some of the things that you're learning. Okay, so my next tip is prior knowledge power up. So activate your mental superpower. So reflect on your existing knowledge and experiences related to the topic. So probably if you're seeking out a topic, it's because it's something that has come up in your work, something that's related to, something else that you've been doing and you want to learn more about it. That's the great thing about self-directed learning. You can go on these learning journeys that's according to your context and your own needs. So kind of thinking about how the content that you're trying to learn fits with your existing knowledge. Maybe it's something that's tangential to something that you do every day, but you want to know more about how it fits within a larger context. So try to build those mental maps and those connections by thinking about how the content that you're trying to learn connects to things that you already know or the work that you're already doing. So our tip for the resources down at the bottom there would be to jot down some of your prior understandings. What do you know already, or what questions you want to try to get answered using some of the resources? Use that note-taking guide. You can jot those down. Again, you have the outline of the content on the left-hand side, so you can do a preview of the content in the module before you start the module and just write down a few questions you have about each of those subtopics. And then hopefully, through the process of your learning, through the module or through the other resources, you can answer those questions, or you can find other resources that will help you answer those questions. All right, so the next one is be a content interaction champion. So engage, explore, and excel. So this one is, back to that zombie e-learning slide that we saw at the very beginning. Sometimes it's really tempting to kind of just be a click monster, right? So you kind of click through to kind of get to the end of the module because you're just trying to, I'm too tired, I don't want to engage, I just want to learn, right? But we know that learning doesn't just happen by letting information kind of wash over us. We have to get engaged and we have to turn on our cognitive abilities a little bit to kind of think and process. So if there's interactive elements like quizzes or simulations, and even if there's not a lot of physical interaction with you and the content on the screen, you still are seeing questions or real life stories or case studies. So really, try to engage with those. And if there are knowledge check questions, if there are quizzes, take a moment to stop and, think a little bit critically or deeply about those. And think about, how you can apply what you learn through the question and answer to some of those questions that you might have written down at the beginning of your learning process. So we want to, promote active engagement on the part of you, the learner, so that you can get that processing and the retention. So again, our suggestion is to synthesize and make connections to your particular context using the note-taking guide. So again, you have that space. It's there for you. It's aligned with subtopics. So try to make some, notes about what you've learned. Where are your knowledge gaps? Where is your own self-assessment of how well you've mastered the content for each of those subsections? Okay, and then retrieval and spacing. This is a really important one to help us use our powers of memory to the best of our ability, right? So a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this myself, if I want to learn something, I'll go, we go down rabbit holes and we try to learn as much as we can all in one sitting, and to a certain extent, you're going to learn something, but after a time, your brain can only hold so much, right? And you're going to forget a lot of that. So we want to kind of mitigate that forgetting curve by using retrieval and spacing. So regularly test your understanding, space your learning sessions over time, allow for periods of rest and consolidation between study sessions. So for example, if you set out a learning plan at the beginning, you have lots of resources, you've got that note-taking guide, you've got those tip sheets, a little bit at a time. You don't have to go through the whole module all at once. You can do part of the module, you can give it a break, and you can come back a few days later. You can continue your learning, go back and review the notes that you took on the note-taking guide to kind of help you, again, just to retrieve some of that information you learned in the first session and, connect back to what you learned the first time. So some things that you can do to kind of support this retrieval and spacing is use your note-taking guides, use your tip sheets to help you review. You can use even some AI tools to review and discuss with your AI some questions that you have. Now, there's some caveats with this because you have to give parameters to whatever AI tool that you're using. So one thing that I like to do is upload like maybe a tip sheet and say, use a prompt with the AI tool that you're using is that I have a question about, this certain aspect. Use the tip sheet as a resource. Do not use any other sources and help me understand, based on the tip sheet. So I think that is something that can be powerful, but we do have to use some guardrails, especially with AI. Otherwise, that AI is going to pull from who knows where and all different places, right, to answer your question. So use the resources that we've, put together for you, give those to the AI and say, use only these resources, but, help me summarize based on these resources only. And that can be a good sort of question and answer opportunity for you to engage with the content in a different way. Okay. So my next tip is real world application adventurer. So bring your learning to life. So once you're kind of going through this learning plan that you've set out for yourself, look for opportunities to apply what you've learned in your daily life or your work environment, right? So kind of in the back of your mind, kind of think about how does this connect to what I'm doing? Look for those opportunities to make connections during the day or, during any of your activities that you do in your job performance. So bringing in that real world application or opportunities to apply what you've learned or to contextualize it. There we go. Contextualize it can make it more meaningful. So one of the things that I love is that our tip sheets are great because the way that the tip sheets are organized your eye can kind of skim to the pieces of information that you might need at any given moment during the day. And, if something connects to something that you've seen in a tip sheet or a module, have that tip sheet out. You can just kind of have it somewhere on a bulletin board, have it somewhere next to your computer or somewhere where your eye can find it easily, and just kind of go back and reinforce, hey, I saw that on the tip sheet. Let me go back and quickly scan that and read through that again, to, again, make those connections between your real world work environment and the resources that we have for you. All right, so the next tip, be a reflection superhero. So after completing the module, it's kind of tempting to just close it, say, that was a great module, on to the next thing, right? But take some time to reflect on what you've learned and how it relates to those goals that you set out. Did the resource that you chose to learn from at that particular moment help you achieve any of those learning objectives or goals that you set out at the beginning of the learning journey? If not, what are some other resources on that resource list that you can explore that might answer the question or help you reach those learning goals? And then, just kind of building in that sort of self-reflective practice can, help you, again, connect to the things that you have learned, connecting and helping you kind of guide you on your journey of where you want to learn more. What do you want to go to next? How can you go back to what you've learned and look at it with new eyes after you've set it aside for a little bit of time? All right, and this is a great one that I think that we can all leverage this in our working context, is be a collaboration crusader. So working with peers, right? So social learning, we know, has a lot of impacts, even for adults. So try to find or build your own social learning opportunities, like set up a discussion forum, and that can be something, a chat group. You can create a WhatsApp group. Hey, this is our Path to Progress WhatsApp group, and we're all going to go through the module together and just post our ideas in that chat group as we're going through it, or as you think about things through the day, right? So it's kind of like, or if you, I don't know, find a meme that relates to something that you learned in the module, you can send that to the chat group, right? Just so to always have something that your mind is always thinking about it. There's a place for you to have those little aha moments that you might have during the day. Post those in the chat, to kind of keep everyone going along in that learning journey with you. And answering questions, we all have collective wisdom together. So pooling those ideas, pooling those thoughts, or, coming up with different analogies to help you understand the content can only strengthen your learning. So, you can choose a module and you can decide, hey, we're going to go through this module. Everybody's going to go through it over the course of a week. Think of it like a book club, and then you could come and meet at the end of that week and talk about what you learned or what questions you still have. So there's a lot of opportunities and ways, both synchronously and asynchronously, that you can build those social connections and help you collaboratively engage with what your whatever your learning goal is. All right, so learning environment. Somebody mentioned that they couldn't study at home or they couldn't learn at home because there's too many distractions. So be a learning environment engineer. So design your own path. So designate a specific time and place. Some people also mention that. What works for you? You know yourself. You're an adult, so find time that works for you where you'll be able to focus, whether it's a place, whether it's a time. Set those aside and find little points during your day where you can make space for learning or reflecting, or, going back and reviewing your note-taking guides or your tip sheets. Something that kind of gives you a space to kind of tune out all of the noise, focus on your learning, even if it's for just 20 minutes, right? Find 20 minutes in your day where you can have a space to kind of reflect and dedicate to your learning. And be a milestone magician. So celebrate your own achievements. And don't forget to pat yourself on the back, right? So if you set out a learning plan, take a moment regularly to kind of check in with your plan. How are you doing? Are you falling behind? Did you set a timeline? Did you set a goal date for you to finish a module or a set of modules? So kind of keep yourself accountable and check in with that. And then also acknowledge your own progress toward working towards those goals, right? Whether it's, doing something for yourself or telling others about this progress that you've made. This is where that sort of social learning comes in. If as a collective group, you can all set some timelines and then collectively celebrate when you all reach those timelines or those milestones or goals. So, just kind of celebrating your success and don't counting out the power of motivation to kind of help you learn and achieve your goals. Okay, so that was my last tip. Ice cream treat. Yes, I highly recommend ice cream, especially when it's super hot in the summer, as a treat, as a reward, or anything else that makes you happy and, use small celebrations, right? Okay, so those are my tips, and we're going to take a look at a couple of different progress modules and kind of think about, some things that you can do, and we're going to take a look at those tip sheets as well. So we already took a look at our path to progress, but we also have a newer module that we just released not that long ago, a few months ago, I think. And this is one of the newer formats of our modules, the teaching cognitive and metacognitive strategies. So for example, if we go to the online course, we try to tell you, give you a good preview of what you're going to find in the course, so you know exactly what you're getting when you go into the module. Unfortunately, this one doesn't have the note-taking guide. It's coming. It's so close to being ready. So we do have it for our IEP collection, and for this collection, we're almost ready with these note-taking guides. So thanks, Amy. So the teaching cognitive and metacognitive strategies. So one of the great things when you go into these modules, like I said, is that you do not have to finish the entire module in one sitting. And, sometimes it could even be better to kind of space out that learning, as we talked about, that retrieval and spacing. So when you come into these modules, we've tried to incorporate lots of different multimedia. You're the driver of this, right? So you can kind of, you can see that I've completed some of this, even though I created it, I go in and test it. But you can see that I've finished some and it saved my progress. So I can kind of come and go as I please to, and the nice thing about this new format is that you can kind of look at that side menu and you can kind of jump to the places. We know that adults don't always like to learn in a linear way. So you have the ability to kind of jump to sections that are of interest to you. You can also do it from top to bottom if that's a way that you learn better. So coming in and kind of looking at the modules, using your note-taking guide to write down things that are of interest to you, questions that you have, going through these modules. So you can use these to kind of set, within your learning plan. Another thing that I want to show you, these amazing resources. If you weren't aware that we have these amazing tip sheets. So again, this kind of is one of the many things that you can kind of bring together in your self-directed learning plan. So not just the modules, but your tip sheets as well, to support your understanding and to have a takeaway, because I think some people mention, they like to have, something that they can kind of highlight and take notes on. So these are great supplements to the modules themselves. You have that learning experience with the module, you can take notes, and then you've got that tip sheet that you can use as kind of like your tangible takeaway that you could also go back and refer to. So let's take a look at one of our great tip sheets. As you can see, it's really organized in a way that kind of gives you gets right to the heart of things. It's bulleted, it's easy for the eye to scan. We have it kind of organized in ways that, you can go directly at what you need at any given time, or you can use it as a bigger holistic review resource. And Amy's sharing those in the chat. And another great thing as well, the tip sheets also include additional resources. So not only do you have the modules with their resource guides, the tip sheets can also provide you with some additional resources, again, that you can incorporate into your self-directed learning plan. All right. Okay, so I've spoken a lot. I kind of trying to not go too fast, but sometimes I get ahead of myself. So let's take a minute to kind of stop and think about some of the tips, some of the resources that you've seen. And just take a moment to think about how can you adapt some of the strategies that I shared with you to your specific context, right? Because I think that's also important, is that some tips are very general. So you really have to think about, how can I contextualize this for myself and my environment and the work that I do? So what are some ideas that you have as you're kind of consolidating these tips and these resources? How can you adapt some of these strategies we talked about for your context? What are some challenges that you anticipate, right? We always know that time is a challenge, finding space is a challenge, finding energy, right? As busy professionals, we have our own work to do. And then it takes, a lot of effort sometimes to add, self-directed learning on that. So what are some challenges that you anticipate, but how could you overcome them? What small tweaks could you do, or what are small steps that you could take just to get started? And so feel free to answer one or both of these questions in the chat and kind of tell us what you're thinking. So I'll stop talking for a second. I'm going to see what comes up in the chat, and think about for a moment, how you can adapt this for your context. What are some challenges, and what can you do to overcome those?
And if anyone wants to come off mute and talk, you're more than welcome to do that too. I know some people like the chat better, but some people like to converse better. So we welcome you to come in different ways. But one of the things I was reflecting, Katie, when you were talking was, I think one of the barriers sometimes for me, in especially self-directed learning on things that I want to do, is competition with other things, right? Like you were saying. And I sometimes want it to, I want to take on so much that it becomes almost like a barrier to entry, right? Like you're like, I'm so excited about this. I think this would be really interesting, but I don't have the time. I don't have the bandwidth, because it's too much. So like thinking about that planning and breaking things into small chunks that I can manage, spending a little bit of time here, honoring that interest, and really focusing on it rather than trying to do everything all at one time. Sometimes I think I get overeager in that kind of initial planning phase, and I'm like, I'm going to do it all, but it can be hard, in that piece.
Yeah, I think, Amy, you hit on something that I think a lot of adults, I think, probably fall into this trap, is that we're, at a certain point in our lives, we're not used to being beginners at things, right? We have so much knowledge base that we built up. When we try to learn something new, we want to be experts, right away, right? And it's just like, I want to know it all because I'm so interested in this. So breaking things down into manageable chunks can kind of set you up for success and help you avoid burnout too early, right? Because I do the same thing. I'm like, I want to be an expert in whatever this tool is or whatever this topic is. And then I just try to take so much in that there's no way my brain can process, and I just have to give it up because I'm burnt out. So I think, yeah, being realistic about how much you can learn and how long the learning process takes, and setting smaller, more achievable goals, I think is something that, I think we would all tell our younger people to do that, but sometimes it's hard to remember that as adults, that we have to set realistic goals for ourselves too. So I'm looking at the chat here. So using the guided notes to keep you organized and focused, the tip sheets. Yeah, and if you're someone who does professional development for maybe newer teachers, think about what combination of all of these resources that you can put together to create a learning plan for someone else, right? Because again, like Amy and I were just talking about, it's hard to be a beginner at something. It's hard to be a novice, and having someone set a path and some resources together for you that you can kind of check in and work on together, I think can be helpful. So someone says using the information, tip sheets, all the different resources, putting together a plan, time every week. Let's see, developing PD before the start of school, giving your staff time to think about what they know. Right, and that's what's great about the online learning modules, is that you can front load some of that learning. I in particular am the type of learner that I don't speak up necessarily because I need time to process and think. So if I'm in a PD session, and someone asked me a question, it's like, well, I haven't had time to process it. We're moving on, right? So if you kind of front load some of these things, people have time to process, jot down questions, and then you can come together and answer those questions. So you don't have to do it all at once. Let's see, time is an issue, blocking off your calendar. Yeah. Sticky notes. Yes. Yeah, I think sticky notes, keeping track of somewhere. I have a nice to-do list that I go and I update every week and transfer it to another to-do list. And I have a whole system, but whatever works for you to kind of keep you on track.
Then you add the tasks that you've already completed to the to-do list so you can cross them out and feel like you've done something.
Yes, exactly, right. There's nothing more satisfying than crossing something off your to-do list, right? Reflect, internalize, and apply. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that goes back to like, putting together a plan for yourself for something that is, we may have a lot of things that we want to learn or challenges that we're facing in the work that we're doing, but finding one thing that you want to improve upon and really taking a deep dive into that and really having an opportunity to learn and reflect and work on that one challenge that you're facing. Because I think sometimes too, it's hard because you need to know a lot of things for whatever work you're doing. And it's hard to focus in on one thing because everything is important, but kind of setting a path for one thing that you want to improve on and using lots of different strategies to do that. Yeah, so we've had someone teaching adults, right? So it's hard to kind of transfer. So again, like used to adult learning and now transferring to like teaching middle school. So as kind of stepping outside of your comfort zone and having to kind of learn a new system and learn some new strategies can be hard. So setting manageable goals, right? Planners. Yeah, overload behavior. Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that phrase, overload behavior. I think I definitely fall prey to that as well. All right. Well, you have all been a great audience. I think we only have about 1 minute left, but I do appreciate your interaction and engagement in the chat. And I think that Amy has shared some resources for you in the chat as well. And you can also find this presentation along with all the other presentations on the Prepping for Progress page where you can access some of these resources that we've shared with you. And good luck on your learning path. And hopefully you found these tips to be useful and hopefully you can apply some of them to your learning plans going forward. All right. Thank you, everybody.